Well, greetings, my beloved clients and friends. Just wanted to do an update with you. So we're in the middle of July and the markets have kind of been ripping up, especially the growth side. It seems like we're back to risk on. And so our portfolio was kind of growth oriented. So we have been able to participate in that to a large degree. But I didn't really want to talk about that. Maybe I'll go into more details on that in a later video. Something inside me said, well, talk about Warren Buffett. And so I've talked about him before. He's the guy that really inspired me, that, you know, I try to understand everything he does and read everything I can about him, and been to his house. Haven't been inside it, but I've been there and went to his the annual meeting and read everything I can about him and about his mentor and his style and everything. So it's kind of style of his and Graham's, his mentor, Benjamin Graham. That's what we closely follow. And I kind of wanted to talk about the 3 stages of his career. And sometimes when, I don't know if you guys know this, but when I have these talks with you, often it gives me clarity to hear myself say it again. And it brings new insight. So thank you, because you guys are a help to me. And so I just wanted to put this out there. So Warren Buffett was born in 1930, and from an early age he was interested in investing. He grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and he said at the public library there in Omaha, he read every book he could on investing. He started doing it at a very young age, and he was really focused on making money. And he had a goal that he wanted to be a millionaire by the time he was 30. And his dad was actually a stockbroker, and he was, trying to figure it out. And he'd spend time there where his dad worked, and as a kid he would write the stock prices on the wall and stuff for them. And and then when he was 19, he was in college, he read this book called The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. It had just come out, and he said that book changed my life. He got it clicked for him, because the style of investing fit his personality, his makeup, and it just made sense to him. And he finally, of all the books he had read, he really still didn't get on investing. That's when he really got it, and he wanted to study more from Benjamin Graham. And Graham was an investment manager in New York, but he was also a professor at Columbia University. And so Warren was finishing up his undergrad there in Nebraska, and he applied to the graduate program at Columbia because he wanted to sit at the feet of the master, and he did. He got accepted. He was a star pupil, and he wanted to go work for him when he graduated. And Graham kind of just laughed, and he said, because Warren Buffett said, "Man, I'll work for you for free." And he said, at that price you'd be overvalued. And but Warren stayed in contact with his mentor, and about 2 years later he invited him to New York, and he hired him. He worked, so Warren Buffett did work for Benjamin Graham for a couple years, and then Graham retired, and there was talks about Warren Buffett taking over the reins at his company, but he didn't. He wanted to go back to Omaha and do his own thing, and he did. So he was about 25, and he started the Buffett partnership with some of his own money, some family money, and some close friends and business people in the community there in Omaha. And he ran this partnership, and it was funny the way he ran it, because he'd only issue a statement once a year at the end of the year. That's when they could see how they did, and that's when they could take money out if they wanted to. I'm not sure how often they could add to it, but and he took a fee, and his stated goal was to get market returns +5. market returns plus 5%. And he delivered. He exceeded. I think for the time he was running it, he was averaging like market returns plus 10. He was doing phenomenal. But it was a pretty small fund. And he invested in the style that he learned from Benjamin Graham. And Benjamin Graham's style was to look, sift through the weeds and find some diamond in the rough, some company that had been overlooked and was really cheap, right? And sometimes they call them cigar butt companies because they're kind of on their last legs, but they still had a couple last puffs in them, is why they call them cigar butt companies. And they'd buy them cheap and wait for the market to kind of realize, oh, this company actually does have some value. They'd get priced up and then they'd sell them. So that was his style. And he was, like I said, he did really good at it. He didn't have a losing year throughout the 50s and 60s. Like I said, he was averaging market plus 10. And he was kind of gaining a following there in Omaha. He had some clients in New York and around, but it was really kind of a small fund. He achieved his goal of being a millionaire by the time he was 30. He was doing very well, but by 1969, he'd been doing it about 14 years, and he would write a letter to investors every year, and in that year he wrote to him and he said, you know what, I'm returning your money because the style of investing that I do, it's hard to do right now. The market's really hot. A lot of things are overvalued. There's not a lot of diamonds in the rough anymore. And if you think about the time frame in which he was investing, the 50s and 60s, really in the 50s, we were coming out of World War II, and before that the Depression, and before that the market crash. So there was a generation that didn't have money, and if they did, they weren't going to put it in the stock market. So there was not a lot of interest in the stock market, and not a lot of eyes on it either, because remember, this was pre the IRA, pre 401k, which didn't come until 1980, and it was when people weren't thinking about investing. Your average Joe, either he had a pension at work or his life expectancy was 70. Retirement wasn't a thing that he thought about. It was just a thing that a handful of rich people did with their extra money. And so there was an opportunity to find overlooked gems in the market. But throughout the 50s, the economy was doing good, people were doing wealthy, more people were doing, the markets were doing good, more people started getting interested in investing, more eyes on the market. And so those diamonds in the rough kind of got found, and there were fewer and fewer of them, and a lot of things were overvalued. And Warren Buffett said, you know what, to make money safely and to get that market plus 5 that I've committed to, I'm not sure in this market I could do it. So in 1969, he shut down his partnership. He gave everybody their money back. And he said, if you want to invest with me, one of the companies he had bought during that time was a company called Berkshire Hathaway, which was a textiles company in New England. And it was generating cash, but it wasn't that great of a business. But he bought the whole company. So he was the CEO of that company. And when he closed down the partnership, that's what he decided to do. And what he used that company for was like a shell company or a holding company, and he would take all the cash he could out of it and invest it elsewhere. He'd invest in other stocks of public companies, and he'd also buy private companies. And he liked insurance companies, and he bought some insurance companies, but a variety of different companies that generated cash, and he was starting building a holding company there. So he said, look, here's your cash. There's this guy that I recommend that maybe you want to talk to, another investor that was a disciple of Graham's as well. And he said, or, if you want to go with me, you could buy shares of Berkshire Hathaway. And it was brilliant. And I kind of envy him because, so he said, if you want to manage your money, buy Berkshire Hathaway. Go get a brokerage account and buy Berkshire Hathaway. I don't care if it's in a regular account, a retirement account, or a trust account. If you want to add to it, you go through your brokerage account. If you want to withdraw from it, go with your brokerage account. If you want to change your address, go through the brokerage account. All I'm going to do is manage the money. If you want to hear from me, come to my annual meeting. So all the administrative stuff he didn't have to do. All he did was manage the finances of Berkshire Hathaway. And he wasn't really wanting to run a textile company. He had people for that. He just was managing the money. And Berkshire Hathaway was doing really well. And so people did show up to his annual meeting by the thousands. And typically a public company at their annual meeting, the only people there are the board. Sometimes a few investors will show up and maybe a few analysts. But at the Berkshire Hathaway meetings, thousands would come. And because they did, they considered Berkshire Hathaway not a textile company they were investing in. They were just effectively letting this wonder kid Warren Buffett manage their money. And he did well. And so that phase one, I said the three phases of his investing career was the 50s to 60s when he was running the Buffett partnership. He had that Graham style of investing where he was buying these deep discount diamonds in the rough, holding them till the market recognized them, and then getting rid of them. In phase two, like I said, it was a hot market, and there wasn't a lot of exciting things to buy. They bought this one company, I think around 1972. He didn't do a lot, and by the way, he was right at getting out in 1969 because the market was high. I think it peaked in 70, and from 70 to 74 it was like dismal. The whole decade of the 70s was not good, so his timing was very good when he got out. And once it kind of bottomed in 74, he started being more aggressive about buying. But like I said, this one company he bought was See's Candy around 1972. I looked at the financials of that, and it wasn't especially cheap when he bought it. It wasn't his typical cigar butt type company, but his partner Charlie said, look at this company, I think we should buy it. And they bought it, and they learned from it. They learned from that acquisition. One of their friends, Walter Schloss, says you don't know a company until you own it. And I've experienced that myself. But once they owned See's company, they got to know it. And it as a company, it had very erratic cash flows. It made all its money in February and December, right? Valentine's and Christmas. The other 10 months out of the year, it lost money. But on an annualized basis, it was just this cash cow. But it was this, it wasn't the type of thing a lot of people want to own, to lose money for 10 months to make a bunch in 2 months, So they got it for a fair price, not a steal, but they got it for a fair price. And they own it to this day, and they learned from this company. They said, wow, this thing generates so much cash on an annual basis. We don't ever have to sell it. It's just a compounder. And the compound returns that they've earned on that over the last 50 years or so have been amazing. It's been one of their home runs. But it changed their investment philosophy to kind of look for those companies that were these, not necessarily the cigar butt or the diamond in the rough, but just this company that has an amazing ability to generate cash. And sometimes that cash generating company, it has one way of it making cash. Like think about like French's mustard, they make one thing, that yellow bottle of mustard, you know what I mean? And it's in every refrigerator and in every grocery store around the country and at every, picnic and backyard barbecue. But that's their one thing. They don't, why they came up with a formula for mustard and that was their golden ticket. So, and it's generating all kinds of cash, but what do you do next? What do you do for an encore? Try to come up with some other sauce or something? Or what Warren Buffett would do with that kind of company, he said, you guys are a great cash flow generator, and I know you don't know what to do with this cash. You could send it back to the shareholders, or you could try to buy some other company that you're not as good at running as your own company, or an industry that you're not as familiar, or I'll buy the company because I'm good at investing cash. You send the cash to Omaha and I'll grow it for you. And that's what he did. He did that for a lot of private companies. He would buy them up when they got to that stage where they were generating a lot of cash and didn't have a lot of growth left. And he'd just buy them, hold on to them, and the people loved it because they were able to continue running their baby, and they didn't have to worry about this cash problem. Which, by cash problem, I don't mean not enough cash. I mean too much cash coming in, not knowing what to do with it, right? Not knowing how to invest it wisely, because they only knew how to do one thing, you know. So that was his niche, and the whole time that he was running the partnership, and from the 50s and 60s, he was like this. I wish I had more money to invest because I see all these opportunities, and I have more opportunities than I have money. That was my problem, right? I wish I had more money to invest because I see all these great opportunities. Well, so then in the 70s and 80s, through the Berkshire Hathaway vehicle, he started having more money to invest, and he was just kicking on all cylinders, right? He had money to invest, he had the vehicle, and he had his niche. He was buying these cash flow companies, these compounders, and he was also buying public companies. And same thing. He says, this thing is a compounder. I could own it for a long time. He bought companies like I think it was PepsiCo, Wells Fargo, that he owned he just recently sold it. He bought it in the 80s. Geico, he still owns, I think. And but so his style changed from that deep value Graham style that he had in the 50s and 60s to these compounders, and he was in the sweet spot. He had money to invest. He was able to take down good sized businesses, and he was able to continue to get phenomenal returns through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that's when he was like in his 40s, 50s, and 60s, and he became a billionaire I think in the mid 70s or so. He ended up on that Forbes 400 list, and he was always top 2, 3, or 4 for decades of the wealthiest man in America. And he started getting notoriety and recognition and celebrity, and people started following him. Thousands of people would show up at his annual meeting, and he became really connected, and who the name that it is today. And then that was stage 2, right? And then the last 20 years or so, I'm going to call stage 3, because in the last 20 years, he's maybe matched the market and maybe lagged a little bit, depending on what time frame you look at. His returns haven't been that stellar since about the late 90s. Because one of the things he didn't like was tech. He said, one of his philosophies was to only buy companies he understood, and he said, I don't understand tech. And so he stayed out of tech, and really the last 2 decades the story has been about tech. So he's lagged the market because he was underweighted in tech. The one tech company he bought was Apple, and it's now his largest holding. But he really is underweight in tech, and he hasn't done that well. And one of the reasons why is because he got to where he had too much money to invest, and by the 90s he went over 10 billion in assets that he was managing, and that was kind of the point where his returns kind of started to diminish, because it got to the point where for him to really look at a company, he had to be able to write a check for billions. So there was a lot of attractive deals that were just too small for him to even pull out his paycheck, pull out his checkbook, if you will. And he had to turn them down because he really, right now he manages over 500 billion. He has over 100 billion in cash, and he can't. Why would he even waste his time writing a $10 billion check? It doesn't really move the needle on his portfolio. So, and he has this philosophy that, virtually never sell anything. So, those three things: he has too much money to invest, and he doesn't want to sell anything, and he's light on tech. Have been a kind of a drag to his returns the last 20 plus years. So those are kind of the three stages of his career, and the stage that I really want to emulate was that second stage, buying these compounders. He had enough money to invest and not too much. He was able to get in and out, and recently he has said, man, if I only had $100 million to invest, I could get 50% returns. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he believes, because he acknowledges that his hindrance is he has too much money to invest. So, when I look at Warren Buffett and I consider him my mentor, I really specifically mean Warren Buffett phase 2. That's the style and the guy that I want to emulate. And so I just wanted to share that with you, to tell you a little bit about what, not necessarily what motivates me, but who I follow and what I'm trying to look like. I got to be myself, but I learn a lot from studying Warren Buffett, and particularly that second phase of his career. So hope that gives you a little bit of insight. I just wanted to get it off my chest, and probably saying it will bring some clarity to myself as well. So hope you guys have a great day.